Hey guys, how are you this evening? I hope you're having a fantastic Wednesday. This is John C. Morley here, serial entrepreneur. Have a great guest. I'm going to tell you about him in just a second. But I want to thank you for popping into IFYL Inspirations for Your Life. If you're new to the family, well, it's really easy. Just pop open your smartphone, click that camera app, point it over the QR code like such, and touch the little yellow lips. You'll get my link tree with lots of great information to improve the quality of your life and give you what you've always wanted, which is to have more passion in life. If you're coming back, thank you so much for supporting me. Really do appreciate you. You know, we're in our second year. And also, I want to thank you if you're rewatching us 1 a.m., 1 p.m., 2 a.m., 2 p.m., 5 a.m., 5 p.m., 6 midnight, 6 p.m. at night, or 3 a.m. or 3 p.m. Whatever time you're watching us, I just appreciate that you make time to make us a part of your life. Our guest tonight is a very interesting gentleman. His name is David Lawson. He is from awakewarrior.com, and he's an entrepreneur, and he has switched his focus to men's coaching retreats and online courses to help men discover how they can find more purpose, meaning, and abundance in all areas of their life. Please help me welcome to Inspirations for Your Life, Mr. David Lawson. Hey, David, how are you tonight?
Hi, John. I'm good. How are you?
It's great to have you here. Thank you for spending some time with us. And we're going to pull that master topic around the screen. There it is. So how to be patient. We're in series 2, which is year 2. We're in show 13, episode number 5. And you really have done some amazing things when I took a look at your website. And, you know, men, being a man myself, you know, it's like there's a lot of things that are very inside, things that you don't share. And I think that's because of the a lot of times I think it has to do with the fact that, you know, we're primal, we want to hunt, and we want to be the best that we can. But sometimes I think the emotion gets in the way. And what I wanted to ask you here in starting today is, you know, how is it that, you know, men, regardless of whether you're, you know, in high school, grammar school, or college, how is it that men today can embrace that part of them where they can still be able to do what they want to do, but feel okay to express those emotions?
Yeah, that's I think it's very challenging for men to live an authentic life right now because there's so much judgment and peer pressure being placed on men to, you know, act a certain way, be a certain way. And I think in a lot of cases men are confused. They don't know what it means to be a man. And a lot of the messaging coming from mainstream media teaches men to not be in touch with their emotions. You've probably heard terms like this, John, like suck it up or don't cry or be a man. So a lot of men, what ends up happening is they push those emotions down. And through conditioning as kids, even in school, you know, we're taught to, you know, be quiet, don't be angry, don't laugh. We're sort of conditioned to not really express how we're feeling. So a lot of men get to adulthood and they're sort of confused because they don't know what it is and what it means to feel.
I think that's a great point. You know, I was very blessed to have a great family, and many people are as well. And so I had the ability to appreciate my feelings, but you still, as you got older, you still kind of stuffed them under the rug just a little bit. I know a lot of people that have stuffed them under more. And when they stuff them under the rug, it's almost like they cause this I don't want to call it an eruption, but it's like them compressing something and pressing it way down. And there's so much stuff you can pack down. And then it's like something has to give way, right?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you look at violence in society, most of violent crimes are committed by men. If you look at suicides and addiction rates, most, I think, at least in Canada, there's 50% more suicides in men than women. Men are 3 times more likely to get addicted to substances like alcohol and opioids and cannabis, things like that. So, yeah, what happens if all they know how to do is push things down, what happens is usually the only emotion they know how to feel is anger. And if there's a ton of repressed stuff that people have, it can lead to things that are not so good, like suicide, depression, anxiety, addictions, and even some violent stuff that some men do. So I think it's very important that the conversation is starting to take place, and men are starting to realize, okay, hey, it's okay for me to feel.
That's a great point, David, that it's okay. I'm okay with who I am, and I'm okay to do this, and other people are okay. And I think that stereotype is starting to drop a little bit, which I think is a very healthy thing for men. And I think there's also that talk of saying this 5, 10 years ago, I'd probably be shot. A man has his masculinity, which is always there, but he's also supposed to have some femininity a little bit, and the lady's supposed to have some masculinity. And it's like that's starting to become slowly accepted now, isn't it?
Yeah, for sure. I think, and that's what we just talked about. It's important to embrace both sides, like the yin, the yang, the masculine, the feminine, whatever you like to call it. It's you need to have a healthy balance of two in order to be successful and abundant in all, like especially in relationships. If you're very masculine, you're not tapping into that feminine side, you're gonna have a hard time relating to your partner.
I've had several friends, and I've noticed. I don't want to stereotype, but there has been some friends that kind of fall into this mold, and a lot of them come from the financial world. Nothing bad with the financial world, but they're very just black or white. There's no in between, and they're taught to really repress their emotions. The Wall Street type. And what I've noticed is that these people just, they might go along a very long time, and then they, like you said, they have an addiction. I had one friend that he had a drink in his hand, which I thought was pretty normal. But then one time we were going somewhere and he didn't have the drink in his hand. His hand was doing this. I said, okay. He said, no, I'm okay. He said, I just got to go get a drink. And that shared with me that he was a lot more addicted than I thought he was.
Yeah, I think that's a typical example of someone that is they're not so. But let me backtrack. You said a lot of men are sort of black and white. I think what that stems from, John, in my experience, is that a lot of times men, if they have to come out of that box of black and white, you can call it a box or that limited belief structure. It's because it's that's safe for them. It's very safe to stay in that limited black and white pattern and not look outside of that. If they have to look outside of that, they have to embrace something that's unknown to them. And our society and our culture is not really given us permission to, in this case, we're talking about the masculine and the feminine. It's not really given us permission to access that feminine side. So for a lot of men, it's frightening to look at things other than the black and white framework. And you talked about this guy with his hand shaking. That's more or less when you talk about emotions. I've said this in other interviews and podcasts. An emotion is really just energy that we're holding in our body, and it wants to move through our body, like physically leave the body. And if we're using something like, in this case, your friend, alcohol, that energy is just going to stay down. And if he doesn't have alcohol in his hand, it sounds like that energy is making sort of his hand shake. So really what's happening is that emotion wants to come out and move through him, but he's pushing it down with the drink. And if he doesn't have the drink, his hand's shaking. So that tells me he's ready to release this emotion, at least physically, but mentally he's not ready to quite let it go. So for someone like that, all he really needs to do is tap into some of the stuff that I share in my course and my workshops and my private coachings, is learning how to get out of his head and into his body. So there's things you can do. There's things like mind-body practices like Tai Chi, yoga, Qigong. There's breath work. There's meditation. There's sitting and learning just to ask yourself how you're feeling. Just some simple practices like that. If you can tap into things like that, that gives this gentleman the access to move that emotion through his body, and he won't need the drink and his hand won't shake anymore.
That's great advice. And you know what I thought I would do, because I thought it would be helpful for him. I said, well, I did stand up many, many years ago. And I said, well, let me try to do a little like sketch. And I did like a little stand up thing, and I did this thing. And he said to me, John, he says, what the blank are you doing? And I said, oh, to be honest, I'm trying to get you to laugh. Usually everyone by now he's laughed. He's like, this is so pointless and a waste of my time. And
Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
I didn't know what to say to that. I just said, okay. And I decided to just let it go. And something strange happened, David. I let it go. And whenever I was with the person alone, they were okay with that way or that new way. But whenever that person was either in public, let's say on stage, or other people were possibly observing them, it's like they had to act differently.
Yeah, as I said, it's challenging for a lot of people to um, access their authentic being of who they really are, because again, they've been conditioned to act a certain way or be a certain way, or live up to a model, say, that their parents had or their teachers had or some of their other mentors. So for people to really just act and let go and be themselves, like I was reading something today about men, how we sort of take ourselves so serious, and what you suggested, crack a joke or laugh or be funny is a amazing medicine for people to access that side of themselves that's non-authentic. So when you laugh, you can't really hide behind laughter. It's either you're laughing or not. And when people laugh, that sometimes shows their true selves, because they're really laughter. If you notice, you're accessing your energy is usually with laughter is in the belly. You hear that saying, belly laughter, or I laughed so hard it was hurting. Like, people are really in their bodies when they laugh, and they're out of their head. So laughter is a wonderful medicine for men to tap into that authenticity, for sure. So your advice is bang on. That's one tool that someone could use to let go of that addiction, at least, and start to look inside. And laughter is certainly one way one can access that. There's no path that's right for everyone's got a different path to get to where they want to get, and laughter is certainly one tool, for sure.
The other thing I noticed, David, which kind of surprised me, I didn't realize how good I was at this. I had a genuine interest to be friends with the person, nothing else than that. And, I've studied psychology, I've done lots of things, but I wasn't even intending to use a technique. Like, it was just naturally what I felt. And the real weird part was that after just a couple meetings, it was like the person thought they knew me for 100 years. Now, I didn't know the person more than a couple months, but someone's like, we should hang out, we should do this, we should go skeet shooting, we really should get to know each other better. I'm like, okay. This is a person that doesn't want to waste their time with people, which kind of like threw me for a moment. You know what I mean? I wasn't expecting that kind of a response. But what I also noticed is that people that do this, they become abusive, not just to, let's say, themselves, but they become abusive to other people. And usually it's people like you go to a restaurant and they get over demanding with the staff to a point that I think is very rude.
Sorry, you're talking about the guy that's been drinking that gets rude? Is that what you meant?
Yeah, so he sometimes, I told you, would be drinking or not drinking. It depends. It depends on whether he was shaking or not. But same guy. It's like he has to show that he's boss. He has to show that he is in control. But I've learned the best thing sometimes, David, is to just let go and not be in control, because the more you're not in control, the more you are in control.
Yeah, I mean, sounds like a lot of men, we wear masks. So it sounds like this guy is wearing a mask to show the world that he's the boss or in control or whatever. But really, deep down inside, he's quite frightened to to just to be himself.
I think that's head on, and I think that's probably a lot with a lot of different people. And I think what I'll say upset his apple cart a little bit is I was the first person to, I don't want to say challenge him, but pretty much call him on the carpet to say, look, why don't you just start doing what you feel like? Like, why do you have to have a reason? And I started I guess my questions started causing him to ask questions. And he got very comfortable with that, which is great. But outside of my environment, he still was that nasty person to everybody. So it didn't break everywhere, but we're talking about a person that when I saw them every morning, they literally would trip me because they were in a rush to get to work.
Yeah, I mean,
That's the kind of mentality.
yeah. So there's not much. I mean, other than what you did was probably quite noble, just to be there. And sometimes people, all they need is a person to talk to and someone that will listen. And your guidance of giving him a place where he can talk and just be himself is probably help him explore that inner dialogue that needs to happen, where he can say, hey, you know what, I'm comfortable with John. He's allowing me to talk and be myself and laugh. Maybe that's why he wants to spend more time with you. And also, once he starts to investigate and discover that he can be safe and just himself, maybe that will help him let go of the alcohol, perhaps, and even become more kind and compassionate to himself and to others in environments that you said he's not so nice.
Yeah, it happened when he went in the public world. He still changed back to that, Mr. Jekyll, and Mr. Hyde. But when it was a setting where it was just myself, it was totally different. But anytime it was like in a restaurant or somewhere else public or whatever, it's like they had to show that, I'm the boss. I'm the one that runs the stage. And it was just like a real different dichotomy. I didn't expect that, one side or the other. What do you think, David, is the hardest thing that you probably have to teach men in your courses? I mean, what's the hardest concept for them to understand?
For men, I think usually it's there's a few, like it's not sort of one magic bullet, but one of the main things for men is we put so much effort into our careers, into our families, into our friends, into just about everything but ourselves. So taking the time to love yourself and do practices that serve you, like spending time alone in nature. Maybe it's some guys like riding motorbikes, or some guys like hunting, whatever that may be. Spending and things like that are more mind body stuff, like sitting and just being and learning how just to be. And when people just sit and be and spend time doing things they enjoy, that's when they can start accessing those deeper emotions. And once that happens, and they can access their body and mainly their heart. I mean, a lot of men have troubles getting into the body because a lot of the pain is stored up around the heart, or the emotions are pushed down below in martial arts, they call it the danchan, or the belly button. So for men, really teaching them to love themselves and spend time just being versus doing, and accessing some of these deeper realms, which really bring the inner peace and the joy. A lot of times, as you know, John, in North America, we're conditioned to think that all our happiness and all our success is going to be measured by external factors. So, how many degrees you have, or how much money you make, or if you're vice president or president or whatever, CEO, or how big is your house, or what kind of car you drive. And all these things are very external. So to recondition men and have them realize that those things, sure, there's nothing wrong with wanting a big house or a new Tesla or a new Porsche or whatever. There's nothing wrong with that. But not to lose yourself and realize that those things are great, but to access peace and joy on your own life, and even in relations for that matter, you have to learn how to look inside and work through your stuff, or you'll never be happy, no matter what you buy or no matter who you marry. And that's a lesson that men were never taught. We're not taught in school how to breathe, or how to access our heart, or how to access our feelings, or how to move our bodies other than, rough sort of sports, how to move our bodies, things that encompass mind, body, and breath, things like Qigong and yoga and things like that. So for a lot of men, it's really challenging to recondition them and show them that there is another way other than what they've been taught.
Also not taught in schools is how to live in the moment. I think that's something that should be on every curriculum, but it's not. About living in the moment, being grateful, That's not just something they teach in schools. And it's like they get out into the work world and we're always trying to rush to something else, but we never enjoy what's currently going on at this moment.
Yeah, I mean, for sure. To circle back to your topic about patience, um, if you're impatient, you're not going to be living the present moment. And I struggle with this sometimes myself. I mean, creating a new business, you're always wanting success. And we have a sales guy in our other business, and I always tell him he gets a bit impatient with success. And I say, my advice always is, don't focus on the progress, just focus on the process. Like, keep doing the things that will make you successful in sales in this case, and not worry about what's going to happen. There's a famous story of a guru in California, and he's in a stadium of about 50,000 people. And he says to the people, "Do you want to know the secret to life and happiness?" And the stadium gets real quiet. You could drop a pin, it gets so quiet. He says 5 words. He says, "I don't need to know." And that's a profound, simple sort of phrase, but the lesson in it is, you don't really need to know. If you're in the moment, you can be much more creative when you're in the moment than when you're worrying about what's going to happen next, or dwelling on a pattern that maybe happened in the past.
But a lot of people put that fear or that worry into things. Half of the things don't ever happen. 9 of the 10 things go into a ditch before they even happen. That they focus on. A wise person once told me, when we focus on the past, there's not a lot of good in the past unless we're thinking about a good memory. But when we focus on the past, it's like we're bringing back a memory that's probably not one we want to remember. And that's going to stifle us from going forward.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, there's that saying, you can't cry over spilled milk. Once something's been done, it's done. So there's no sense in really going back and fretting about it, or stewing about it. And the same goes for the future. Like you said, 99% of the things that we worry about don't ever really happen. And if that's one thing I could tell myself, the 25-year-old self, now, it's one advice would be, don't worry so much. Everything always seems to work out, especially if you're doing, the kind gestures like patience, kindness, love, and compassion. If you're accessing those higher vibrational dimensional feelings that we store in the heart, that's really when the good things start to happen. And when you can learn that really right now, John, between you and I, this moment is all we have, and there's nothing really wrong with this moment. And that's how we all need to live. It's funny. I think on average, they say we have about 60,000 thoughts a day, and 90+% of them are the same ones as the day before. And a friend of mine who's studying Buddhism and shamanism, he told me it's more than 60,000 thoughts a day. He said it's something like four thoughts every second. Like, the brain is so powerful, like more powerful than a supercomputer. So we have so many thoughts, and most of the thoughts, like you said, a lot of people are not really in the present and embracing the present moment, which is where all the magic happens in life.
But everyone wants to rush to that finish line. They don't want to enjoy the actual race, or they don't want to enjoy the process. Another wise person once told me that success is not a destination, it's the continued journey. And success is never over.
Yeah, for sure. Enjoy it. Sometimes enjoying the process is where the real, fruit of the nectar of what you're doing comes in. When you're doing something and you're worried about what happened in the past, or you're worrying how it's going to turn out, how can you really enjoy what you're doing, right?
You can't, because your eyes are always looking, and it's kind of like if you're driving on a road, I can only see so many feet in front of me. I can't see 5,000 miles ahead of me.
No,
so I can only handle what's immediately. I can only handle imminent dangers in the road or what's there. I can't worry about a tree that fell 1,000 miles from here. because the
Yeah,
train may not even be there by the time I get there.
Yeah, the being present is probably one of the most simplistic philosophies. I mean, if you look at some of the ancient teachings and books in the world, there's one called the Bhagavad Gita. I think it's one of the oldest spiritual books in the world, and it's about a warrior that has to go to war, and he doesn't want to go to war, and his teacher Krishna just basically tells him, stop worrying about the outcome. Just do what you have to do in the war, and don't worry about what's going to happen. So, and even, I mean, there's a newer one. I mean, Ram Dass wrote a book about, I think it's the I Am Now. And then there's Eckhart Tolle that wrote a book, The Power of Now. All these are like best-selling classics, and they all sort of teach the exact same thing that you and I are talking about, which is being here now in the present moment. So it's a very easy thing to say, but it's very challenging to do and to be. And again, a lot of it comes from conditioning our culture. You turn on the news nowadays, and the news is talking about inflation, and the economy is going to crash, and the stock market, and you walk outside, you're going to get the next virus and Zika and this and COVID and that, and everybody's that's turning on the news is taking in that energy, which is an energy of fear, and that is very hard for people to be present when they're in a state of fear. So that's one of the reasons. And then also we talked about conditioning as kids. As kids we're taught in school, get the good job and get the degree and save for retirement and buy the house and buy the vacation house. So we're always looking to next to make ourselves happy. And that's another reason why I think it's so challenging for people to live in the present moment now, which where we all need to be.
But being in the moment gives us a chance to enjoy what's going on presently. When we focus on the future, there are some benefits, but if we're always focusing on the future, then we never can think about what we're doing now. And fear, which is another wise person said, fear is not really fear. It's false evidence appearing real.
Yeah, I love that.
I love that too. So, so getting people obviously out of their shell is one thing that guys have a lot of challenges with. Would you say that once somebody comes to that stage to, now be able to want to, let's say, embrace who they are, is it a long journey for them, or is it typically a pretty quick process?
It's a long journey, at least in my experience. I mean, some people are lucky and they may have been born into a family that, taught them some of these practices. But, like in Buddhism, they talk about once the Buddha became enlightened. Well, how did he get enlightened? Well, he chopped wood and he carried water. So he did all the practices to become present. And then how did he stay enlightened? Well, he chopped wood and carried water. So the first step is wanting to make a transformation or a change, which I think has to happen. You've heard that saying, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink. So I think the person, in this case, men, have to be ready to make a change. And sometimes, and I don't wish this on anybody, but sometimes that takes a life changing event, like a divorce or an illness, or, sometimes loss of a job or a family member, some of the more tragic things that we all have to deal with. Unfortunately, have to happen for some men to want to make a change. And once that happens, then it takes work. It's just like being healthy. Like, you have to eat healthy and you have to move your body. If you want that purpose and abundance and joy in your own life and in your relationships, and you want to feel alive and purposeful in your career, I think it takes a lot of work, and it takes work to look inside and deal with some of those traumas that most of us all have. And it's challenging because you have to sit with some of that pain. And most of us are accustomed to use addictive substances to deal with the pain. So it's really like doing a 360, from going to pushing that addiction down with a substance or a behavior or a pattern, to wanting to sit and embrace that. It takes a lot of courage. It sounds easy, but it's not.
Now, success, we talked a little about that just briefly. Success is something people try to mirror from others. And if they haven't seen success, they're looking for a role model to be able to copy, right? Because maybe they haven't achieved success. What would you say to someone like that?
I think that can be a real positive teaching tool. I mean, I think if you can model someone else's behavior, you can save yourself years. If you look at someone that's, say, been successful in one area, and you model, I hate to use the word copy, but sure, copy what they've done to get to where they are. And if the person, a lot of these success stories have written autobiographies, and they'll share some of the roadblocks or some of the challenges, the way they went through to get to where they are. And if you can learn from someone else, I mean, that's what a lot of coaches and mentors do. They use their experiences in life to help someone that hasn't had that experience in life to get them to where they are a lot faster. So using shortcuts and copying, or I like the word modeling best, is an excellent way for someone to get from A to B much faster, and not maybe have to go through some of the heartache and the pain that they did to get there.
I think that becomes a problem for a lot of people, is that they've seen how someone else did it, and they don't realize that they might be different than that other person, and that your path might be easier, it might be harder, but it's just, what I like to say, is different. That everyone's path is not exactly the same in how they need to get from point A to point B. A lot of people try to go from point A to point Z, but they just skip all the other intermediary points. And then they get to Z, and it's like they get to Z, but they're lost. Because even though they're where they're supposed to be, they're missing so many steps, so much information, that they got there like by luck almost. And now it's like they don't know what to do with themselves, because they rushed all the way through to Z and never stopped at B or any other letters.
Yeah, and I think there's a I guess some of that you could possibly say is someone looking at, it again, in our culture in the US and in Canada as well, we're taught that, with, if you look at the advertisement industry, we're taught, if you have this product, this, or this model wife, or this, 10,000 square foot house, that's going to make you happy. So I think what happens a lot of times is our definition of success by the advertising industry and by our culture is, if you have all the material success, you call it from A to Z, you're going to be happy. And then a lot of people get to the Z and they are like, hey, this is really not all it's cracked up to be. And ironically, a lot of times they didn't enjoy the process from A to Z. And a lot of times they may have sacrificed their health and well-being to get to Z. You probably heard that fable, or that tale, where the business guy does all these things and gets to the top of the building, and he climbs the ladder of success, and he realizes at the top of the ladder, his ladder is leaning against the wrong building. And I think that happens to a lot of people. We look at someone else and say, hey, wow, you've got everything. And we try and copy that or mimic that. And then we realize that that's really kind of empty, and there's more to life than that.
Or what I've noticed is that people try to copy that, and they copy it exactly. But what they don't realize by copying it is they also copy all the problems. So
Yeah,
just like that other person has all that success, or so it appears, there's also other issues. There might be family issues, health issues. And it's like they copy all that as well, because they've done exactly what they've done.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that's a possibility, I suppose. I mean, sometimes when you're talking about the materialistic world, sometimes if people are striving for, let's use the example of success in their career, I think in a lot of cases they lose balance in other areas of their life. So their relationships may suffer, with their spouses or their friends, with themselves. Their health may suffer. So I think the key for men in this case we're talking about in this context is to find a healthy balance in all areas of their life, not just the materialistic success, but also their relationships and their health and their family and their spiritual world. So I find it's funny with men. In a lot of cases, they're really strong in one or two areas, and they might be really and really weak in another two areas. So I think the challenge for men is to bring balance into every area of their lives, and that can help bring success and abundance, not just in financial and money and materialism, but also in happiness and inner peace and joy.
And when you're saying that, I'm kind of relating that to a patience piece, because patience is like a balance. People say to me, John, what is patience and what do you do? Do you just sit and do nothing? It's actually your mindful state, and it's also how you choose to respond to a situation. I think that's what propels patience, as opposed to, I waited 2 hours for them to finish, but was I waiting like patiently, or was I waiting with anticipation? And I think that's a big thing. And that when we wait with anticipation, there's stress, there's other factors that come into play too. But I think if we can learn how to balance, when something doesn't work a certain way, and accept that this is how it is now. It might not be the way I want it to be, but it is where I am now. And to be patient, not just with others, but I also think we need to be patient with ourselves.
Yeah, I know. I love that. Like you said, just sit and be versus responding. Like if you're in a non-reactive state, you're going to be more open to change and to creativity. When you're in a reactive state, it's almost like you're in a sort of a survival mode. Um, so I think that's a really good point, John, is to just sit and um, not be so reactive. Just be more patient with yourself, and like you said, and with others. But it all starts with ourselves, and looking inside to deal with some of that, the challenge of impatience, which really is a stem of fear of not knowing.
When you get gentlemen from all over, do you find it's best that they go with a buddy, or is it better to just go with other strangers? What's the best way for men to grapple with this and to, let's say, become accepting? Is it to go with a buddy, to go with some friends, or is it better to do it with strangers?
Sorry, John. Just to clarify, to do what?
Oh, so like when you're talking about the retreats and you're talking about, going on these things, is it good to go with strangers, or is it good to bring friends with you? What do you recommend on that?
You know what? It's there's no right or wrong answer, I suppose, for that. I mean, if someone's comfortable bringing a friend or two, then great. Some people are more independent, like to do it themselves. A lot of the retreats I went on, initially I went by myself, and then my wife got really intrigued and she started to come along with me. So um, that depends on the person, I suppose. Sometimes in relationships, one person is in a certain place and the other person is not. So I think the key, at least in my um, the retreats and the workshops I've gone on, is just to, and some of the stuff my wife's gone on is just to allow the other person to grow. And if they want someone to come along, great. If they don't, then I guess respect that as well.
So that's another great point, David, and that's respect. It's accepting somebody where they are right now. They may not be where you are. They might be further ahead, or they may be behind you. And I think it's just acknowledging that everyone is going to progress on the journey of life at their own pace.
Yeah, I love that. That's very rings true, John, for sure. Like sometimes when people get on this path of self development or inquiries, a lot of times our egos like to come out and say, "Hey, I'm better than you," or "I'm further ahead on this path." But we're all growing at our own rate, and it's best not to compare others. It's best just to focus on yourself and where you are, and respect other people for where they are. So not everybody had the same upbringing. Some people had more challenges, so there's no it doesn't mean you're a bad person if you're not further along the path than someone else is. And I think that's an important lesson for people to embrace and realize. Sometimes we have to just love everybody. And man, imagine if we did, there'd be a lot less problems in the world if we loved everybody, never mind whether they were what color their skin was, or what religion they were, or what country they were from, or what they did for a living. That would change our whole entire world. And it starts with ourselves. What's his name? Uh, Gandhi, his famous quote was, "Be the change you want to see in the world." And imagine if we all just focused on that versus other people. There's that quote that says, you've got one finger pointing at someone else, and you got four pointing at yourself. And I think if we all focus on ourselves, that's a great start for a healthier world.
I love the Gandhi quote. I think that's something I wish everyone would follow. The thing I would tell everybody is that, sometimes we have our passion to get people to want to change, to become better. But in that passion, when someone's not ready to, I'm going to say, jump in the swimming pool or take that leap, and you put that push, you have to kind of know when to stop. Because if you become too pushy, the other person could become angry, aggravated, because they're not ready to take the step. Maybe they will in the future, maybe they won't. And they're going to resent you because you're pushing them down a path they're not ready to go through yet.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, a lot of times I think people will rebel if you try and force something down their throats. And, the best thing you can do is focus on your own inner journey and your own inner healing and your own transformation. And, we're all energy. We're all, if you look at our bodies, we're all emitting energy. We have energy coming from our hearts. Our heart's one of the biggest energy sources. They're doing studies at the Heart Math Institute showing how powerful our heart is in terms of intuition and energy levels that it emits in terms of frequencies. And, if you start to do some of the internal work and change and work on yourself, other people will feel that without even you having to open your mouth. They'll start to say, "Hey, wow, this guy's, giving up this habit, or, he's, taking on this new healthy venture, or whatever it may be." People will start to observe that, and they'll, in marriage, they say when one person starts to work on themselves and improve, then the other partner can feel that and they improve as well. So, I've had buddies that have been divorced, and you hear people say, "Oh, she's this or she's that." And a lot of times, it's not the other person, it's ourselves. We project some of that stuff onto other people. So the real work is not blaming and looking inside and taking responsibility for making ourselves better. And when that happens, as I said, you don't need to push people into what you're doing. They'll start to feel it and want to, they'll be curious. They'll be like, "Hey, man, what's John doing? He seems a lot more chilled than, what's David up to over there? He seems a lot more happier." And people will get curious, and they'll say, "Hey, they'll want some of what you have, or what energy you're transmitting to them," if that makes sense.
Absolutely. There was a great movie on many years ago by a Christian academy, Shiloh Academy. They produced several movies. One of them was called Facing the Giant. And they had another one on, I think one was called Fireproof. I think that's the one I'm talking about. Fireproof was a movie where there was going to be a divorce between the gentleman and the lady, and he didn't want to have the divorce. And his father came to him and he gave him the Bible, and he started to read passages. And he just kept working on it, and just keeping on it slowly. And at the last moment, even though a divorce was like filed, the paperwork was already started, he said, "Just keep working on it. Just have faith and keep working on it." And he did. And there was a last scene in the movie where there was this doctor who she was kind of dating unofficially. And remember, she wanted the divorce with him, and he didn't want the divorce at all. And so what wound up happening was the doctor had bought some things for her parents that needed some medical stuff for their home. And so his wife noticed that someone just bought this brand new bed, which was, I don't know, several $1,000s. And so she goes to the medical supply and says, "Oh, was the doctor that bought the bed. He's like, no. Well, if it wasn't Steve, then who bought it? You thought you knew your husband. And so when that happened, she started to have a different recollection like, oh, what have I done? And so now he didn't say anything, he didn't do anything, and he just kept praying and he just kept working on it. And she turned around. And I believe that happened. It was a movie, but I mean, that happened because his energy turned from being negative and abusive to one that is basically supportive and just non-judgmental. He started cleaning the dishes. He started doing dinner, all kinds of stuff he never did before. He was a fireman. He never had time. But yet when he came home, he always cleaned the dishes. He did everything. And it changed. It took about 30 or 45 days. And that whole thing changed. But I believe that everything in our life, David, is energy. I mean, we're not actually here right now. We're vibrating molecules and atoms.
Yeah, no, I concur for sure. And I heard a similar story to that. I think someone went to a therapist and said, "Hey, my wife's going to leave me," and the therapist was, "Okay, this is what I want you to do. I want you to wake up every morning, and I want you to write a note to your wife saying, a compliment, and and at the end of the note say, I love you very much. I'm so grateful that you're in my life." And I think a lot of times in relationships, as you know, we show up at the beginning and the relationship's great. And I think one of the keys to keep a relationship going is to show up in the relationship like you showed up when you first met the person, and keep trying to keep that that energy and love and excitement and passion alive. And what you described in that movie, what I'm describing this in this story, I think the guy did that for 30 days. At the end of 30 days, his wife's like, wow, this is a new guy. Like, I want to stay with him. So for sure, I think if you and a lot of that comes back to, again, working on yourself. And when we work on ourselves, that energy is felt by our partners.
I think that's in everything in life, whether it's business, whether it's personal. When we start to, people say, when we do the meditation things, it's not the magic of just the meditation, of just the energy, but it's also the fact that when you're in the same environment with them, your reactions, your energy changes around them because you're not so apprehensive, you're not so anxious.
Yeah, and the topic we're talking about, patience. You're probably a lot more patient because you're taking the time to go internal and work through some of those patterns and energies and addictions that and emotions that need to be processed and come out. That's the key to life, I think, is working on ourselves. And once we start to heal ourselves, others around us begin to heal, and our relationships flourish, our career flourishes, all the good things in life. And it's not magic, but the problem with our culture is that a lot of times we're looking for the magic pill. Like, we want everything to instantly be better. And as we talked about earlier in the podcast, John, it takes work. It takes work to improve ourselves.
There's no magic bullet, unfortunately. There's just work, and there is just consistency, and doing that diligently every day and just working on it. And I like to say there's something called taking our temperature and other people's temperature, and I don't mean that literally. I mean, how close are you to that? Are you further to your destination? In the car with GPS, I would say, if you set the place you want to go, and you're far from that, the car is going to steer you somewhere else. If you're close, then you're close to it. So how far or how close are we to our set destination?
Yeah, I think that's different for everybody, right? I think everyone's on, like we talked about before, everyone's at a different stage of their on the path. Some people are very conscious and want to shift and change, and there's other people
that don't.
like we talked that don't. Yeah, it might be very frightening for them to look at some
like
of this
they
stuff.
have, David, like an apathy. Somebody once told me, and I would have thought that the opposite of love is hate. I learned that the opposite of love is not hate. The opposite of love is apathy, not having any care, any thought, any feeling, which was very interesting to learn that. So when you go from love to hate, that's not opposite, that's different. Love to apathy is a real polar opposite. And I think a lot of people today, they feel that if they're not in control, they don't want to be in the relationship anymore. But it's really got to be a two-way street.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, apathy. I like the word too. That's a beautiful framework. Apathy. Also, compassion and empathy are two words that we
I
all
love
could
that
use.
too.
Yeah, we could all use more of. Compassionate and empathy, not just with others, but even with ourselves. Sometimes we're so. I was listening to. There's a doctor in Vancouver, Gavi Mator. He's written a few books, and he's worked a lot in Vancouver, Canada, with people with addictions, and he was saying, asking the question, what's wrong with me, almost like as a statement. And you're going to be looking for something's wrong with you, whereas if you do it more with more compassion, empathy, and more self-inquiry, it's more like, why am I being like this, or what's really going on, why am I acting like this? So more of a question versus a statement, because as soon as we make a statement, we make a judgment and we get angry with who we are and where we are. And that's just going to make a spiral even further down the road of, in most cases, it's addiction. But so in this context, the way he was explaining it. So I think if we can look inside and look outside at others and be compassionate towards them, ourselves, and empathetic, and like you said, apathy, that's a great place to start.
David, this has been very interesting learning about you and, sharing these thoughts and how you help other guys with, getting in touch with themselves and just understanding the whole process. Because I said, there's no book written for us, unfortunately, there's no book that you can just go to the store. Like, we didn't come with an owner's manual. I always joke about that. I mean, but I've really enjoyed having you on IFYL tonight. And is there anything that you would like to share with any of our viewers tonight, or any of our listeners in the podcast, before we say goodbye to you?
Yeah, sure. Anyone that's struggling, I just released an online course. This is a sort of little more targeted, but towards men that have any challenges with anxiety or stress or burnout. I just finished editing a course, and it's available on our website for sale now. It's a really powerful course for any men that are stuck and they're not sure how to get out of that anxious or stress or burnt out state. It's really helpful. It shares, it gives men tools to find that inner peace and a lot of the stuff that we talked about tonight. And then finally, I'm just working on a new project that's going to be a 21-day challenge for men. It'll be another online sort of course that they can access, and it will cover a lot of this ground we talked about today too, John. It'll help men find that inner peace and purpose and happiness, and it'll give them 21 little mini challenges to work through. They always say after 21 days, you create a healthy habit. So it'll be something along those lines, and I'm excited to be working on that. Other than that, I do offer one-to-one coaching. I'm booked out a little bit right now, but anyone can find me at awakewarrior.com. And I thank you, John, for this conversation. I found it very, very deep and very enlightening, which we don't get a lot of nowadays. This stuff is sometimes very surfacey. So you seem to have a really good, we seem to be on the same page in terms of wanting to help. And I think this message tonight, I think, if we even touch one person, that can help sort of
we did something amazing.
We did something amazing. We just changed one person's life. So I thank you, John, for sort of asking me some of these questions, because they were quite deep and you made me think. And I enjoyed it. I had a lot of fun.
Well, it was great to have you on IFYL tonight, and maybe we'll have to have you come back in the future and talk to us about some of the other things you're working on, or maybe we'll dive deeper into some other areas. But I think this is definitely one area that I know more men want to get more information on, even if they don't admit it in public. I think it's something. By the way, you can listen to this podcast in your car. No one will know about it. You can also watch this on our social media. No one will know you watched it either. So you can do it when you're ready, in the privacy of your home, your office, or on your jog, or at the gym, or wherever. So yeah, David, thank you so much.
Oh, thank you, John. I think this topic is becoming more mainstream anyway. So I think, the more people that you should tell people about this stuff, because the message needs to get out there.
I try every day to hint. And then when they take the carrot, I'm happy to go further, but I just like to hint to see if there's an interest. Because if I go with the whole dinner, I don't want the dinner thrown at me.
Good for you. No, thanks, John. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you so much, David.
Yeah.